Good. Perfect. Exactly. Okay. So, okay. So, should I get Mr. Akin to speak first?
It's up to you, however you want to do this. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to do just an introduction of myself, or if there's a specific question I should lead off with. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll do just a quick introduction. My name is Dr. Aurora Dawn Benton, and I reside in the Southeast United States. And I have a varied career. I've worked in several different industries, and I love change. So that's something that I've always been excited to try something new and go into a new space. But I would say that a common thread throughout all of that is passion and purpose. And now it's like that purpose and passion piece, rather than just sort of being the sprinkles on top. That's now like the cake of my life. That is the thing that I do all the time. I'm full-time work in sustainability and social impact. So I love what I do. It's exciting work, and I'm excited to share details of what that means as we have a conversation today.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so that takes Dr. Aurora. So one of the reasons why we decided to start this conference is because we realized that other things are happening in West Africa and Africa at large, and even, let's say, generally all over the world. And we have young people who are left out somehow in participation. And I discovered that the problem is not the fact that young people have been left out. The problem is the fact that young people don't know what it takes to participate. So it's not really about the fact that young people are not participating, but because of they don't really know what it takes to participate and what it entails and what it means to really get involved. So that's why the team is competency and capacity building, because I believe those things are things that would actually, help young people and to mentally build their minds, and at the same time, areas of their life where they have been issues with. And now, one of the reasons why I decided to have Dr. Aurora on this platform was because we had a section on Instagram and she spoke about destruction, and I felt, wow, this was very powerful. And it's very important that we have people like Dr. Aurora speak to young people about destruction and sustainability as a whole, because I believe it's very, very important, because I believe young people joining this and those who are not really young and those who are middle age can really learn a lot from her as well, And that's why I said, okay, we need to have her as a speaker to speak on the conference, So I'm really grateful for having to join us. And then, so I think we'd have to let Dr. Aurora begin, and then we would have Dr. Akin join us. Okay, Dr. Aurora, the platform is yours, and we are ready to learn.
So would you like me to maybe pick up on that theme of disruption and just sort of the innovation and, yes? Okay. So I think that you're really on to something here when you talk about the fact that young people don't know how to get involved. In the field of sustainability, I speak to a lot of audiences that are new to sustainability, new to the idea of sustainability. And the most common question as it relates to sustainability is, where do I start? And I think that with any new thing that people want to get involved in, any kind of disruption, any kind of work that is not already a comfort zone, your first natural question is going to be, where do I start? Like, how do I get started in this? And it's very easy to feel like you don't have the right credentials, you don't have the right education, you don't have the right title, you don't have the right friends, you don't have the right family, you don't have the right skin color, you don't have the right whatever, gender, whatever it is. It's easy to feel like you don't have what you're supposed to have to play in a specific space. There's this concept of the imposter syndrome, right? People feel like, oh, well, I don't know enough to be in that conversation. And so I think part of the way you can get past that is breaking these types of things down into the very specific practical steps people can take, right? The how. How can I get involved? What can I do? And sometimes the change that people want to see, they associate with activism or, like, oh, I've got to be a social media influencer and have thousands of followers. Like, before I can move the needle, I have to do these big grand things. And how can I go from zero to all of that? Believe me, it's very hard to do that. But what you more practically can do is look at the span of control that you have in your life. That could be where you're at in your group of friends. It can be, you can work at the front desk of a hotel, or you can work in a factory, you can work in an office, you can be part of a church, you can, whatever that is, you have a span of control, meaning there are people you can influence unofficially or officially, and there are activities you can perform. And so sometimes what you have to do is just start there, right? So in sustainability, a great example of this is people get very annoyed by waste, right? Waste everywhere. And there's very little recycling infrastructure globally. The recycling rate for plastics is like around 10%. It's very low. And people get very frustrated by the fact that they see waste everywhere, even in the United States, where we should, in theory, have more advanced infrastructure for these things. And what I often hear is things like, oh, I'm so frustrated because people put all of their garbage in this can and the recycle bin is like 5 feet down the hall. It's like, then move the recycling bin, right? Like, it's such a little thing that people feel is like, oh, some power up there decided the recycling bin has to be here. And in some organizations, that's true. And organizations need to be better at empowering people at an operational level to make changes like move the recycling bin 5 feet if you have to, right? Because then you get to start to see tangible action and results from something you did. I made the choice, I made the decision. And then what I often find with the people that I work with is it starts with little things like that. And then they figure out that their coworkers are watching and their coworkers are noticing. And then their coworkers will come up to them and say, hey, what if in that other room over there, we did this and moved this over there? Yeah, let's do that. And now you've got a team. Now you've got like a culture movement of people. And don't underestimate the power and importance of little things like moving a garbage can 5 feet, or a meter or whatever system you're in, because those little things are the way that you can exercise some control and change in the things that you have power over. And if you're a young person, you probably don't have power over a whole lot. So take what you can get, take the power you do have and think of ways that you can make small changes that will lead to results.
Wow. See, this is why I said we needed someone like Dr. Arora to actually be on this platform. And it's really powerful having you speak on this, So one of the questions I actually wanted you to actually speak on is for young people who now I know you might have heard news and challenges Africa as a whole we are facing, and some of the problems we're facing with we have investors finding it hard to come to Africa, especially in areas that are not safe. So a lot of people actually find out to even set up organizations, to even set up things, to set up non-governmental organizations, non-profit organizations. So it's hard for young people right now. It's such a time as this in West Africa and Africa at large. In Nigeria, we hear of news of people being kidnapped and people going through a whole lot of things. And so sometimes the hope of having to build a company organization that ensures the life, making sure that people live a better life, it's slim, very slim. And with the fact that you've had mentored people, you've taught people on sustainability and all that, I want you to speak on how people can strive through challenges and then tough times, especially with knowledge, the little knowledge you have about how it takes to actually adjust to change, because the truth is this, it's hard to actually adjust to change, especially when you're not comfortable with it, So I want to talk about how an individual, a young person can, work with change and as well condition themselves to work with change, like something they're not used to.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, entrepreneurship is hard, no matter where you're at and what the conditions that surround you. You can, even in the wealthiest nations in the world, entrepreneurship is a hard thing to do. And when you're trying to start something new and make change and go against the grain, you're trying to do things, the thing that you hear, this concept of systemic oppression or systemic racism or systemic economic challenges. The key word there is systemic. These things have been sort of built in and baked into our systems for centuries sometimes, right? And so that it is hard to change the minds of people and the processes of companies and just reverse everything. And so I think that part of the answer to that is partnerships and collaborations. Don't try to do anything alone, because doing something new, I think sometimes it kind of depends on the person, but sometimes entrepreneurship can be seen as this sort of like sex symbol thing, right? Like, I want to be on the cover of a magazine. I want to be like the next whoever, you want to have sort of like leave my mark in the world. And that's great. And that a lot of entrepreneurs do get to take that path. But the vast majority of them are just working very hard behind the scenes, and be willing to take a personal assessment of what your strengths and gifts and talents are, and seek out people who have complementary talents and gifts. Like, I know for myself, I've had to come to terms with the fact that I'm not the best at, like, I understand strategy for marketing and sales, and I'm actually really good at advising other people on strategy for marketing and sales. But for my own personal endeavors, it is like, that is like the hardest thing in the world for me. So I've been trying to figure out partnerships where people who enjoy social media and enjoy marketing and sales that I don't enjoy, but they appreciate the content I bring and my courses and the products and services that I bring. And I'm starting to find some of those partnerships. And it's beautiful because it's like, I get to do my thing that I shine at, and they get to do the thing that they want to do. And I'd say just really be vulnerable and open yourself up to just needing others around you to help you and be part of this together. You can pull your resources, you can pull your talents, you can pull your strengths. I would also say that now is a very encouraging time to be trying to get funding in the social impact space. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the organization called Echoing Green. But Echoing Green has been around for many years, and they grant really, significant funds. And this past year in their grant cycle, they were very adamant about diversity. And they've recently released the list and have a page with the photos of the people who they are funding. A lot of work that they're funding is in Africa. And of all the faces on this page, there's one white person. And that to me is incredibly empowering and encouraging, that organizations are starting to look at their portfolios of investment and say, wait a minute, this systemic racism thing is real, and we've really got to look at other opportunities and other kinds of investments and other faces and diverse voices to bring into this. Now, it's still a cutthroat thing. There's still a lot of people going for a little bit of money. And so you need to, I would say, just basic business principles. Have a sharp pitch deck, have a strategy that makes sense, be articulate about your ideas, run business case, have spreadsheets, and you do all the things that can really set you apart from the competition that thinks that just a good idea is enough. Change is this exciting, passionate, fun, cool thing. But at the end of the day, real change is backed up by spreadsheets and good PowerPoint text and documents and board advisory boards and things like that. So don't overlook those things, and get yourself educated on how to put together those kinds of structural pieces that will make any organization stronger.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Aurora. I'm really, really glad having you speak, really, really glad. And then I would actually want this to be more interactive, actually. So I'm actually using the opportunity to wait for Dr. Akin. So, he's in Nigeria, and then I believe we have other people going through individual challenges, and the team is actually competency and capacity building. And the question I actually want to ask on this topic is, what can you say about competency and capacity building? What can you say about that?
Can you ask the question, say about competency and what was it?
Yeah, I said, what can you say about competency and capacity building? What do you understand about? How can young people build competency? How can young people build capacity?
Yeah, I think putting things into practice. So one of the things that I do is I run a green team course at a college level. It runs for people that are seasoned professionals as well, but there happens to be a version of it that runs at a college as an elective, where students who are part-time working, part-time going to school, they start a real green team in their business. And I think the magical, beautiful thing about what I see when I run this course is that students are able to do more than they ever thought possible. So you have to really stretch yourself. And you can do some of that by book learning, go to school, go to university, take online courses, go to conferences, all that's really great. Book learning is really important. But there is nothing quite like having to just actually do something, right? Like do something real. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to go work for some big company and be the VP of sustainability or the VP of innovation or whatever. No, just whatever place where you're working, if you have a part-time job, or if you don't have a job, but maybe you have an organization you're part of, like a church or a other religious organization or a community neighborhood group, or your family. If you have a big family, one of my students during COVID, she was like, well, I'm not working right now because of COVID, but I live with my mom and dad and 2 siblings. Can I start a green team with my family? And I was like, okay. And she did. And they have and she ran it like a company. And everybody had assignments, and she did all the work that every other student did as they were working for a company. But the important thing is that she knows how to do it now. She can walk into any interview and she can walk the talk. She'll know what to say in terms of, if she were to say, like, if she were asked, what's something unique you can bring to our organization? She could say, I know how to start a green team. Well, tell me more about that. And she can tell them all about, well, here's how my family reduced waste. Here's how my family reduced our water consumption. Here's how and a lot of that is about influence. It's about observation. It's about making things very practical, breaking things down into steps. That's project management. That's leadership, right? So a lot of these things that you get book learning on, find ways to put it into practice, because the difference will then be when you're standing in front of a decision maker who can either invest in you or hire you or partner with you, you won't just be talking terms and concepts. You'll be able to talk about real steps. You'll be able to talk about results. You'll be able to throw numbers out, and that's going to really matter. So just start where you're at, do what you can where you're at, and it won't be long before you will realize that will expand into the circles where you would like to have greater influence.
Wow. So, wow, this is very powerful knowledge right now, So I believe we have, one of the reasons why we actually had to do this conference was because I discovered a lot of problem in the leadership system in Africa, and which I think it's actually global, but the visibility of this efficiency, this deficiency is more in Africa, because we have leaders who do not really understand what it means to lead, and not because they don't really know, but because of how would I put it? Should I put it as their shortcomings, And I discovered that when we restrict ourselves to a certain knowledge, we do not know the other side of it. So I thought that it was very important to have people from different sectors to speak to young people about the topic of competency and leadership. And that's one of the reasons why I said, okay, I should have Dr. Arora and then other speakers to speak to young people. It's very important. And so I would want you to address the subject of leadership and Why I would want to speak about this is because I see how knowledgeable you are and more in-depth understanding you have about your area of specialization and your field. So the question is, what can you tell people, young people, about leadership? Leadership, leadership. What can you tell young people about leadership? I think I have my own point of view of leadership. So I think it's very important we have another person's point of view of what leadership truly means so that it will help people.
Well, it's a huge topic. I mean, it was one of the courses that I did in my doctoral studies, like the whole course that's on leadership. And there are entire doctoral programs around leadership and all of the different styles of leadership and a lot of theory and psychology behind leadership. So there's a lot that can be said about leadership. But I think what I would choose to hone in on right now, because you did mention leadership in your nations that isn't working, maybe there's shortcomings. And I think what could sometimes be the cause of that is living in a bubble. Most of the people who are the leaders of your nations, my nation, around the world, people tend to run in the same circles. They went to the same schools together. They tend to come from wealthy families of means. They're not suffering and hurting the way other people are. So it's easy to get extremely disconnected. It's easy to become very elite in your thinking. Even when you're trying to do sustainability and positive impact, people can become very elitist in their thinking. I'll give you an example of this. I recently was speaking with somebody right after this recent climate report came out, and I'm working currently on this initiative to really drive supplier diversity in the events industry and really try to get more events suppliers and event planners to purchase from small, diverse, disadvantaged businesses, minority-owned businesses. And one of the things that struck me in this conversation is this person was saying, like, this climate, it's just like really kind of riled up, and she was saying, every business that any business is doing business with any other business, all businesses should be doing Scope 3 emissions analysis. Well, if you're not familiar with that term, let me just say it's incredibly technical work, and very few organizations globally are actually doing Scope 3 emissions analysis and offsetting and reduction and stuff like that. And so I was like, yeah, but if you require that, most disadvantaged businesses, they struggle with just basic like finance and accounting. They don't even know these words you're saying, much less like you're really going to, and her mentality was, we don't have time for that. We don't have time to be worried about supplier diversity. If we don't fix our climate, there will be no supplier. Well, I think that that's a very limited view, and we have to have this sort of empathetic, justice-oriented, both and view of things. And so whatever problem a lot of the leaders are trying to fix, they're very myopic. They see the world through this particular problem, and they haven't thought of it from a systems view. So I think systems thinking is incredibly important when it comes to leadership, and empathy, really understanding, and even if you're, like, I try to make myself look at that elite, closed-minded leader and say, okay, I may not agree with their viewpoint, but where are they coming from? Like, what in their life and in their training and their, ideology or whatever, what makes them think that it's okay to think that? Right now, I'm not saying I'm going to change my mind or anything, but I try. It's not easy. Okay, let me tell you, this advice is easier said than done. But I just try to think of like, well, where did you come from? Because if I can understand better what fears drive you or what passion and interest drives you, then I might be able to tweak my language and my approach and my visuals or whatever to accommodate where you're coming from, and then I can reach you more easily. So I would just recommend from early on that your young leaders study systems views of things and look at the full system of any kind of problem, and remember that you're always really only looking at it through a pretty narrow lens, and you need to engage other stakeholders and have conversations with other people, and always keep that level of humility so that you so disconnected from the realities that most people are still living in.
Wow, Dr. Aurora, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for having you here. Really, really grateful. And then, so I would want to acknowledge one of our speakers who will be speaking tomorrow, Dr. Sylvester. He was I think it was a U.S. Army, former U.S. Army. Dr. Sylvester, if you're around, would want you to just say hi, introduce yourself, and just say something little. Though he's speaking tomorrow, but you could just say something today. I don't know if you've heard me. Okay, I think maybe he should be busy or something like that. So, okay. So really, thank you so much. You said something about systemic thinking. It's very important when it comes to leadership. And really, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. So before we end the section and we'll let you go, or before that, I want us to actually have a panel, a section with Dr. Hakeem, so where we share ideas on leadership and all that. So before that, I would want you to briefly talk about disruption when it comes to, I had that section with you last time, and I think we have different viewers here right now. I want to talk about disruption, especially where it is very hard to break convention. It's very, very hard to be unconventional in a system where it is required of you to go through the normal convention. So how can people systematically break through, sections? So yeah. Oh, Dr. Akin just joined right now. So briefly say something about that before we,
Yeah, so I think that it's, if I remember correctly, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said and how I said it last time. Because every time you speak, it's like, it's all there, but it comes out in different ways. But I think the key there is just really the fact that it's about empowering lower levels of the organization. And it's really kind of turning things upside down, because typically, like, lower levels of society and lower levels of organizations are not empowered to really participate very much, right? And so to me, the best kind of disruption are those where leaders put themselves in a position to guide and empower the lower levels of organizations in society. Because the ideas that exist there, as well as just the need for those people to be able to participate and able to voice their needs and able to contribute, true innovation and unique ideas come from all levels. I know when I do work I do a lot of work in convention centers, right? So you've got everybody from dishwashers and janitors all up the way up to, sort of the CEOs and general managers. And I often hear when I'm touring the building and we're talking about like waste reduction and food waste reduction, I will so often hear like, oh, we have this, look at this system here where we do this now. And most of the time it was the idea of someone who takes out the trash or washes dishes or does what would be normally considered a lower level job. But because they're the ones that live it every day, they have the best ideas, very innovative, cool ideas, if anybody would just take the time to listen and help them think about how to design the ideas and implement the ideas and train and all of the other pieces that higher levels of the organization tend to do. So I think that's an opportunity for disruption. And I think you use the word destruction. I mean, that's right, like the sort of the destruction of the traditional organizational setups. So that's one thing that comes to mind. If there was something else I said last time, you can remind me, and I can sort of take off on that. But I think that just that empowerment of lower levels is something that I often, is sort of one of my themes that I will bring up anytime I can.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I would want to ask if you could still be joining. So if Dr. Akin speaks, if he's done speaking, then we could actually have like a panel section where we share ideas. So Dr. Akin is joined, and Dr. Akin is actually he's someone I look up to very well, especially in the sector which I want to grow in as well. So I would officially want to welcome Dr. Akin. Welcome, sir.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Akin. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing perfectly well. I've been waiting for you.
All right. I think I joined in some 5, 7 minutes ago, and I was enjoying what the other speaker was saying. I mean, I just felt like listening to her on and on and on. I wouldn't have to say much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So last year we had Dr. Akin speak on capacity and competency building, and he made some very powerful points. And I think it was very important to have Dr. Akin again to speak to young people. Though we might not have a lot of young people joining now, but this is a very first virtual conference we're having. So I think he said some certain things which I believe young people should hear as well, because he is a Nigerian and he's also a pastor as well too. So I think it's very important that we have him here and to actually help young people, especially in the journey becoming whosoever they've envisioned themselves to become. Thank you so much, Dr. Akin.
You are most welcome.
The floor is yours now. We're waiting for you. So we're going to have a brief section with Dr. Arora, and then we're going to end this for today.
All right. So I want to say well done. Great job there. Fantastic conversation by Dr. Aurora Dunn Benton. I mean, so I was enjoying the things you were talking about. It was just sounding like we're in a training room for organizations, you know, and it sounded like one of those things, and that was really, really good. And like I will see Mr. Sylvester Jenkins on the call too. Thank you, Miracle, for the opportunity to do this. And I think she said it a whole lot. So for me, I would just buttress a few of the points that she's made, and we are just able to get into panel. I think I'm more excited about the panel sessions, the answering of the questions there. So capacity is very powerful. Competence is very powerful. They're two powerful things. Another thing I can add in line to that is character alongside. So the reason why I said this is very simple. Capacity, young people, human beings naturally, for those who are ambitious and those who are thirsty, we want to do more, we want to achieve more. We have this vacuum for more on the inside of us, and as much as we have that, it makes us want to yearn to get into some bigger stuff. You know, I don't want to come from an organization's perspective now. I want to come from an individual's perspective, because I think Dr. Aurora spoken a whole lot from that area. Now, one of the ways capacity, if you do what you don't have capacity for, you cannot find yourself in control of it. If you find yourself around that environment, you are going to mess up there, because what's bringing you forward could just be a door of opportunity that open to you, which can open to anybody. But what's going to sustain you in the hallway of the opportunity that is open to you is basically from the place of capacity. So you must learn how to utilize, how to build, and how to maximize your own competence level or your capacity level. And here are 3 things I think is going to help you in achieving that as a person. Number 1 is that you must learn to start doing things differently. You know, every time I start a new year, anytime so my new year is not necessarily January. So when I say new year, so for my business, my new year is probably August. You know, for other things I do, I think it's October, you know, so I have different times for my new year, as it were. So every time I'm starting something new, one of the things I ask myself is, what are the things I've been used to doing? So I write them down. Then the next thing I tell myself is this: I'm going to stop doing most of these things, and I'm going to start doing some things that I have not done before. obviously, when I say I'm going to stop doing those things, I obviously have a system, or I have a group of people who can continue exactly what I have been doing, and they can do it maximally to the level to which I think I wouldn't have a problem with that delegation level. But I want to switch into something else, something much more productive, and it helps me to build capacity. At that point, you are in between two things. You are either wanting to stay around the magnetic property that wants you to stay with the past, what you've gained mastery over, what you know, what you are in control of over time. There's always that magnetic property to put you there, but the other way you can see if you have grown is to allow people to do exactly those things you've been doing without you getting emotionally attached to it, to see whether they are doing it well or not. And you just move into something else. And I think that that's what every executive does at certain levels. When they say somebody is a CEO, chief executive officer, what it simply means is that you're executing. The real word there is that you're executing. And the word execute is you carrying out some things at the top. So many times you see a CEO not in the office 24 hours like other staff. He's not there all through, but he makes the decisions. And the only one decision he makes can get the organization into a funny place. And so you find out that the hours of work of a manager, a mid-level manager, as fantastic as it is, it's not as important as one decision that the CEO makes. So that's one thing I've tried to do for myself. Number two is that I just don't want to do things differently. I tell myself I want to do things that are unexpected to people. So for example, people are not, and I think this was John Maxwell that said this, people are naturally not expecting you to exceed their expectations. And that's why people are wowed when you exceed their expectation. So they're surprised. I mean, so if they were expecting you to do that, if they were expecting you to exceed the ceiling, they would not be so excited or feel so great that you are doing that. No, they're just going to feel like, oh, okay. But when they see you do something unusual, they're like, wow, we never saw it coming. This is good. This is some extra hour work. This is what you call a professionalism. This is demonstration of expertise, as the case may be. So I learned to tell myself, I want to go beyond what you have expected me to do. So I have one balance that I always share with my staff. Don't tell me why something cannot be done. Do all you can to get it done. Then come explain to me how difficult it was to get it done. That makes or holds more water with me as a person. So anytime you see a ceiling, you tell yourself it's not a ceiling, it's a door, it's an entrance into something else. What do we call excellence? Excellence is just a word that says exceeding the ceiling. So you just keep going and keep going. So you just want to make sure that you are able to meet expectations. So you're meeting expectations, and that's really powerful. And the third thing there that I think would help is not just you doing things differently. Number one, not just you doing things in an unexpected way for people, but number three is also doing it with the best of your ability. You see, you don't grow big by talking. You don't grow big by wishing. You grow big by going close to what is big. And that's the truth. And that's how to develop your capacity. If I want to develop a muscle, I don't have muscles, But if I want to develop muscles, all it takes me is to do a lot of exercise. And I hit the gym almost every day. And I do certain exercises that have to do with me producing muscles, because I do exercises that affect my heart. So I can run on the treadmill. I can do a little here, a little there, but not necessarily because I want to grow muscles. Now, so with the best of your ability. So it means that you are there's a pattern of life that you are working towards that is helping you towards those things. So there's a way, there are certain decisions you are taking. There are patterns that you will see, and you will know if you are growing or not. And when I say growing your capacity, so for example, every man needs about 4 capacity to develop. Number one, you need what is called a spiritual capacity. And when I say spiritual capacity, I'm not even talking about your religion now. I'm talking about a philosophy with which you live with. The concept, the beliefs that rule your life. That's absolutely spiritual. Those are like underlying factors. Those are things that control a lot about your existence. It's like the root system of everything that you carry out every day. So you have the spiritual. Number two is that you also have intellectual capacity that you must develop. One of the things that I've learned, and I think it was E.W. Kenyon that said this, that make your brain sweat. The best of it is that it will get you a bit tired, but it will never pack up. So use your brain. Albert Einstein said this, and even Newton added a little bit of it, that most of us don't use up to 1% of the capacity of our brains before we die. So less than the percent that we always get ourselves into. So, and that's very, very important. So we need to develop our intellectual capacity. Number 3 is our physical capacity. Physical capacity have to do with things like your fitness and your health. Your health is very important, and your fitness is very important. If your health is not good, if you're not fit, you are going to be failing even in the task that you're trying to get out. Many people don't know that there's a direct relationship between their fitness and how much they are getting the job done. It affects how you stimulate ideas in your brain. It affects the creative juices that flow through you, and all of those things. So it's important we develop that. And the last part is the emotional part. The emotional part, permit me to just stick to emotional intelligence aspect there. Emotional intelligence is how you can handle your own emotions. So you're talking about personal awareness. You're talking about your own personal management. Then in relationship to social awareness or social management. So what that simply means is that you first, then get into others, how you've been able to understand, analyze, interpret, and manage your emotions in relation to that of others. If you understand that, you will know that you can deal with anybody, deal with any boss's leadership style, you can deal with any kind of line manager anywhere, just because you've been able to develop capacity on how to deal or work with this kind of things. So I think that this is going to help a lot of young people in terms of learning to build their capacity. So like I said, I didn't want to try to repeat what Dr. Aurora had said, so I had to come in this direction so that we can see a different perspective, very simple, and the panel session is going to help us there. Thank you, Mr. Miracle.
Okay, Dr. Aurora. Yeah, Dr. Aurora, you wanted to say something?
That was fantastic. What a great job of complimenting and reinforcing, but just so much more that you unpacked there, and that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Akeem, for adding the things that you said. I love the idea of discipline, like comparing it to working out and working a muscle. That's so true. And I think your comment about going above and beyond expectations. These are just things that I think young people just don't necessarily understand how powerful these things are. Professionalism. I mean, as a college professor, oh my gosh, the things that I see that I'm like, oh my God. Some basic professionalism goes a long way. So yes, I was really enjoying the comments. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to go to the panel section right now, and then we have some questions that I received for young people and things that I've seen young people going through in Africa and in Nigeria especially. So we want what we want to do is actually, Dr. Aki is from Nigeria and you representing Africa, and Dr. Aurora is from the US representing the Europe. So it's more of having to have not be myopic in decisions, but having to know what other people see about what it is. So the first question we actually have is, a lot of young people right now do not really know what leadership really is. And then they think when you mention the word leadership, it has to do with certain people. So they feel like leadership is for certain people. So maybe those from a poor background who do not know anyone, who are actually poor, and then all of that. So when you hear leadership, they feel it's not my area. Maybe I'm more of like an entrepreneur, so maybe that's not it. I'm not a leader in that area. When you're maybe a marketer, so no, I'm not a leader. So we want you to actually really share your point on what do you think leadership really is globally, and something universal name or definition for what leadership is, so that a lot of people do not feel like they're exempted from the word leadership.
I think that what you just described comes from the fact that people equate leadership with expertise. And leadership does not equal expertise, and expertise certainly does not equal leadership. I think leadership is about, this comes from the fact that I worked with a career coach about maybe like a decade ago, and was just really kind of like at a growth point at the organization I worked in at the time, and was just trying to really sort of figure out my steps and everything. And so she had me describe different things I do that I enjoy and what I'm good at and how people respond to me at work. And so I was saying all these things, and she's like, so you're a thought leader. And I was like, oh, yeah, exactly. She's like, so one thing you have to understand because I was expressing frustration over the fact that I felt like, I had all these great ideas and all this, I was trying to do all this stuff and that people weren't responding in exactly the way I thought they should. And she said, by definition, if you're a thought leader, you're thinking things before other people think them. And I was like, oh, yeah. So she said, so that means you have to invite them to come up to where you are. You have to invite them to understand and have that awareness. And I was just like, well, yeah. And so what I realized, especially all the years as an instructor, is that oftentimes I was asked to teach classes that I'm not an expert on. Like, oh, hey, can you teach this course? And I'm like, sure. Like I don't have expertise. I've never done this before, but I'm a good teacher. So yeah. And what I realized is, as long as I am one step ahead of the people I'm leading, that's all that's required. I just need to be one step ahead of them so that I can guide them into that step. Now it's helpful if I'm further down the road and can give them a better roadmap. But sometimes leadership is literally being just one step ahead of the people you're trying to convince. And you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have arrived at any location. It just means that you're willing to walk forward and be the first person to step out on a path that's unknown. Right. And as long as you can look down and see your feet, right, there might be fog and you can't see anything more than a foot in front of your face, but you can see the ground in front of you and just take that one step. So I think sometimes leadership is really just about, what does it take to be confident in yourself, to take that one step, and then other people can follow you, right? Be the kind of person, and I think this is a lot of what Hakeem was saying, that you have to be the person that people would want to come behind, right? And that's where, professionalism and quality and all of those other discipline and other things come in.
Yeah, Dr. Hakeem. Okay.
I think he's on mute. You're on mute if you're.
Yeah. I just figured out I was muted. So fantastic one there, Dr. Aurora. So just like some of the things I would love to say, you say, so I'd like to do another perspective also. For me, leadership is first a capacity. It's a capacity. I see it more like a capacity. So when she says one step ahead, so it takes a lot of capacity. It takes capacity to be one step ahead, and it takes a lot of work. So for me, it is the capacity to influence. Capacity to influence. So when you're one step ahead, that's an edge. If you're ahead, that's an edge for you. So it's a capacity to influence, people, and maybe organization in the context which we're talking about. So the idea is that there is capacity and there is influence. People don't fall into if they are not influenced and if they do not see capacity. So when she says that you must be one step ahead, it takes capacity to do that, and the influence. So that naturally is going to compel influence for you. So it's the capacity to influence the people following you. I would also see leadership as as an idea that has to do with somebody who is taking the lead, somebody who takes the lead and meets the needs of other people. So you take the lead and you are meeting a need. So you identify a need and you see that this is a gap, there's a lacuna somewhere, and you decided to take the lead. So I can also say that's some form of leadership. So just like you were saying, in entrepreneurship, in this, in that, depending on the context in which it is being used, everybody's a leader in all spheres of influence, as it were. But the idea is that do you have the capacity, and are you compelling the influence for people to follow you? Yeah.
Can I pose a question? I would love to hear Akeen's response or anyone else's response.
Okay.
One of the things that I sometimes hear people talk about, especially when it comes to diversity, is that we have to accommodate different thought processes and styles and approaches, right? So it's easy to equate leadership with extroverts and assertive people, which I think we can all agree we are, right? Like, clearly, I'm an extrovert, I'm an assertive person. My guess is that most people got to this panel because that's who they are. They put themselves out there. They're public
Introverted. I'm introverted.
You're introverted? Okay, so then I think I would love to, I would love to hear what you think about because a lot of the audience here might be thinking, but I'm not the person that's I never speak first in the meeting. And that person's a better listener than me, right? Maybe the introverted person offers something I don't bring to the table, but that is needed as part of the complete leadership picture. So what is your advice for the introverted person that might think that to be an influencer or to influence others, you have to be the dominant person, the assertive person, the confident person, but there are other ways maybe to influence people. What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So for me, this is the perspective I'm going to see it from. So I don't want to start talking about the different personalities that people have. Before it used to be 4, the research made it about 16 right now. And I think as at the last count, it's like about 21 or something. And so people now have different personalities. They just break down into different things. So it's now beyond whether you are extroverted or you are introverted, as it were. There are other compositions around your personality as a person. But for me, what distinguishes, or what makes a lot of sense for me is when you find a sense of purpose as a person, whether you are introverted or you are extroverted. So for somebody like me, I love to always be quiet. I love to be, when I was younger, I love to be at the back. I'm not somebody who wants to come forward, so the idea is that you'll see somebody who is excited, who is extroverted, and is always the one taking opportunities first, is the one always coming out first, and all of that. It is very easy to assume that that person is a leader, but one of the things I said is this: number one, no matter how the person is excited to take the lead, you check capacity. So there's an eye for leadership. You check capacity. If you're introverted, if you're on purpose, even if you don't want to come out, purpose is going to push you out. Your essence for living is going to push you out. You may not enjoy it, but it's going to push you out. So leadership itself is not even in the appearance, or it's not even in how charismatic that you try to be for people to think that you're a leader. For me, I would say that it's an intrinsic value system that comes out externally by the amount of values that you put into yourself. I don't know if that makes some little connection there.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Aki. Thank you so much, Dr. Aurora, for that question. I think it was a very important question, and I hope the viewers actually benefit from it. Thank you so much. So the next question is, in Africa right now, and I think it's global, we have a general and a universal problem facing leaders and nations at large, which is corruption. And we have different reasons why we have corruption and all that. And in Africa, it's very heightened because of how we were curtailing it. So, and I believe a lot of young people, especially in college, University Lagos, and I see a lot of things happening in the system. It's somewhat like a systemic value where it has really been destroyed. So when you come into the place, when you come into the system, you need to follow the values that they have created over time. So the question is, how do we cause disruption in systemic values that are not aligning to our beliefs, and naturally they're not universal ethics that are actually appealing to all? So how do we break such things? Because I believe one of the reasons why this question is coming up is because of somehow leaders of the past have allowed their shortcomings become a standard for young people. So when young people see leaders that embezzle fund, they make it look like it is a standard. It's not wrong. So it becomes legal. So young people go into political sector sometimes, especially in Africa, because of the fact that leaders somehow in the past have made the system hard for young people. So they bounce back to the leaders because of there's no money for them. So they eventually want to steal. They eventually want to do anything to embezzle to get money. So it's be very hard. So the question is, how do young people cause disruption in such a system, especially with the fact that they know that it is the right thing now? So their minds have been wired to think it is not wrong to embezzle funds because of your suffering, so it is okay to do it. So what are your opinion about that?
Well, I guess what I would say is going to be kind of generic because, I'm not going to put myself forth as some sort of expert on, the African system, corruption in those countries. But I just would say in general, like I think of what's going on in the United States here. Last year, when we had the death of George Floyd and a lot of other racism issues come up and a lot of Black Lives Matter movements and protests, suddenly companies started to show that they cared. Like after, decades of this mattering, suddenly it had reached a tipping point and you saw all of these press releases and all of this change come out, all these commitments. What I'm finding now that I'm working on this supplier diversity initiative is I'm starting to look more at reporting and the transparency of companies to say like, okay, well, these companies are saying they're doing supplier diversity. Show it. Show me the evidence. So I think that measurement and reporting are critical mechanisms for uncovering things that can get lost in sort of philosophical and cultural historical terms and constructs. So if people are saying that some practice of corruption is no longer acceptable, just like people are saying now in the United States, supplier diversity matters and they're trying to set supplier diversity goals, which means measurement, then they're going to have to start putting their money where their mouth is, essentially, right? So if people are saying that these things matter, then what can they measure and report? And that may require legislative changes. It may require that, find more transparency in financial management and financial contributions and things like that. And we've had a lot of that in the United States because it's everywhere. I mean, it's not unique to Africa or the United States, right? Money corrupts. And so there's always a need to have some sort of guardrails around this. But I would say not just even extending this beyond the idea of political corruption and the political arena. If you are in any kind of organization, a religious organization, a corporation, a nonprofit, whatever, try to find hard number metric things, whether it's like, I can count this, I can see, yes, you did this or no. It's transparent and it's reported, and preferably using some sort of globally accepted standard for that particular type of reporting. Because there's a lot of that out there. There are really smart people who've come up with, this is what you should report when you're reporting political contributions. I have no idea, but there are people out there who do, and they'll tell you. So I would say try to follow like global standards, look at what the United Nations is recommending, and try to leverage that sort of like global standard piece to give credibility. I think that Akeem might have even mentioned the idea of credibility earlier, but basically, to character, I think, was a part of his formula. And so I think that kind of goes along with it, right? Like trying to show that there's this other entity out there that also cares and can report and can investigate and can validate. And so that's where certifications and standards and registries and things like that come into play. And sometimes there is money tied to being in the right registry or being certified by the right body. Investors more and more are looking for companies that are listed on those types of registries. So there can be financial benefit ultimately in doing that. You're trading one financial benefit to the other. It's difficult. If it's lining people's pockets, you're going to have to pry their closed hands off of that. That's just a given, and that's tough work. And I'm not, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of experience in doing stuff like that. I can just speak generically to the fact that in the corporate world, if you require metrics and reporting, it can make the difference.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. That's really very, very detailed. Yeah, Dr. Aki.
All right, so let me build a foundation. I think what Dr. Aurora said is what I should have spoken before she spoke, so that what she said was just going to be the whole thing to just conclude it. So let me take it a step backward. So putting some African spice to it, because I understand because I play here, so I know what's happening here. So, and I understand what he's trying to say. You know, Africa for many years, we've never had true leadership. We've never had true leaders. Most times Africa had always been reigned by rulers. And there's a difference between rulers and leaders, and even leaders and managers. You know, so we've always been ruled. So when the people react, they take positions as rulers. So for them, leadership was more titular, it was more around the title. You know, it was around the things they carry around. So once they're out of those title metrics, they don't think that they're a leader again. You know, so, and because of that, it has brought the African system to a point of non-accountability, because if you are being ruled, it means that you do not have a say. So it is exactly how, whatever they say it is, that is what you take. In fact, it is recorded that when you begin to come out, I mean, before 10 years ago, if you come out to question those existing things, issues, you're seen as being rebellious. You know, but we know, because they know that, I mean, in the past 10 years, we've seen a lot of changes. There's no system that exists in its perfect entirety. There would always be some loopholes, just like you can say a few things about Europe and that. So people are beginning to see loopholes, and they're beginning to say, no, we are calling for transparency, we are calling for accountability in certain things. So one of the things that have affected Africa is the mindset. It's first the mind, and before it became a set. You know, so before it became a way of life, you know, so it's the mindset. The mind needs to be improved on the right information. I mean, most of these things that you have said, honestly, I mean, I represent Africa, but I'm not sure an average person who's holding a political title understands exactly what you just said. I'm telling you the truth. You know, so there's a mindset problem. So we need a mind shift. You know, and that's very, very important. And number two is we need to, so for example, being ignorant is not even enough. For us to say that, oh, most of our leaders don't know this and they're the ones leading, is not enough excuse, as it were, because these things they are everywhere, they are open, they're not closed information, you know, as it were. So it means that are we practicing casing? Are we given to continuous development? Are we wanting to be learners? Are we open to get better? You know, or is it about the monies and all of that? You know, because I know corruption, before you get to the political system, you can find it everywhere. In every family, there's some measure of corruption. In every organization, there's some measure of corruption. So you find it little here, little there. And that's why the standard is a standard. It's not something that can be changed, as it were. So I would have said this first, then Dr. Aurora would have come to cap it up with what she said. So I went a step backward.
That's super helpful, because I know that my lack of personal familiarity with this leaves me, you know, sort of at a disadvantage of being able to offer, I think, the most practical advice. And so I appreciate that context you gave me. I'm learning a lot from this. So thank you. And hopefully, eventually, the pressure from the outside world to comply with and be a part of these global systems that include reporting and transparency will be, you know, there can be young leaders in Africa that from the grassroots, ground up, can try to stir up and sort of question and challenge the cultural mindset.
Yeah.
But then maybe the external pressure of sort of the global finance system, the United Nations, other sort of global systems that are requiring more transparency and anti-corruption and bribery and sustainability, et cetera, can start to, these two pressures kind of come together to create a new sort of a new mentality.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Arora. So I want to come to an end because the motive is really to get young people to watch these sections. For those who are not able to join now, for those who would also join as well tomorrow as well. So the last question we actually want to put out is the question of character and skills. Most of the time, I've seen this a lot of time in my school because I see it a lot of young people, and I see how skillful young people are, and I see the role of character. And so the question is, how do we impact young people like me who are very skillful, but see being skillful as a very important thing when it comes to leadership? So how do we balance this? What is very important? Is it the leadership? Is it character, or is it skillfulness? Because I think it's global. I think so. It's universal. We have people who rate skillfulness more than character, and somehow it has created a pattern of incompetency and lack of capacity because we're giving more preference to skillfulness than character. So what's very important in this case for young people? Dr. Aki, I think that should go to Dr. Aki, so Dr. Aki will speak.
Sure, let's reverse.
All right, so if you're making me come first this time, let me lay a foundation, because I'm super sure that what Dr. Arora is going to say is going to cap it up. So, and I'm going to be a bit comical to answer that question. Right. So, if I want to if I want to come to the United States, for example, from Nigeria, and I get into the aircraft, and I see, I met the pilot, I met the cabin crew guys, and everybody are ready to fly, and the pilot walks up to me, and says, wow, you know what? I'm drunk. I'm really drunk right now. And that means I'm full of alcohol, but I can fly. I mean, honestly, I've been flying for 25 years, but I'm drunk. I mean, I'm full of alcohol, it's just that when I'm drunk, I don't know how to control myself. I'm not myself, but you know what? I just want you to know that the person who is flying you is a drunk man who's been flying for like 25 years. So I look at myself and I ask myself, can I get out of this aircraft? Because you can fly so well, you've been flying for 25 years, good track record, but now you're drunk. So what of the other scenario? Let me do another scenario play. Somebody says that, you know what, I've been a good person all my life. I have a good character. I've been working with global standards. I'm good, just gives me a good CV of himself. And he says, but honestly, I've never flown an aircraft before, but with my character, that I've told you, I'm about to fly you. Honestly, I'm going to get out of that same aircraft. So none of them make sense to me. The first one, the second one, no, none of them make sense to me. It tells you that character and competence goes together. I'm not going to say character is more important than competence. And I'm not going to tell you competence is more important than character. I need the two to coexist together. I needed two of them to cohabit together for me to get a good formation of leadership. So the idea is this: a skill can open the door for you, but what keeps you in the door, what sustains you in the door, is the character, as it were. So they go together. So that's what I would like to say. But you see, Dr. Arora is going to cap it up in a very massive way. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
That is such a great analogy. I think the whole that story of flying the airplane, that is a really fantastic analogy. Where I was going to go with this is a little bit of a different bent, but I'm going to sort of leverage something that Akin said here. And one of the things that I've put into practice in the last couple of years is a particular strengths assessment that your audience may or may not be familiar with, but it's the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment that's run by Gallup, the Gallup organization. It's an online assessment you can take. I think it's, it's not terribly expensive to do compared to some other tools like that out there, and it's worth it. And what I love about the system is that to me, it sort of blends skill and character, and it ranks your strengths, and the system encourages you to focus on your top 10 strengths, not trying to make your bottom strengths, not to see them as weaknesses that you somehow have to fix. Instead, to really enhance and hone your top strengths. So for example, my number one strength is strategy. I'm very strategic in what I do. My number two, I think, is connectedness, and how I believe everything is connected and we're all connected in different ways. Communication is one of my top beliefs. I'm very driven by a belief system. Some of my lower ones is, for example, my lowest number 34 is discipline. I hate routine. I'm not good at things that you have to do the same thing every day. It just doesn't work for me. It's very hard for me. And so what I love about that system is that I've taken a lot of time to look at my top 10 and realize that there are ways, there are some teachers around this particular set of strength, this particular assessment, that talk about the fact that any of these strengths can be manifested in a mature way or a raw way. And mature would be, you're using the skill and strength in a way that really benefits and it sort of enhances what you're part of. The raw way to use it is maybe things like, getting too emotional. Maybe belief means I'm too quick to just sort of follow my senses and not do my research, right? But the positive of belief is that I'm super passionate and I'm able to get other people to join my movement because I'm driven by a purpose and a belief. And so I love this idea that any skill or ability can be sort of two sides of one coin. And if you don't take time to discipline it or to exercise it or to hone it and work on it, you can manifest things through anger, impulsiveness, addiction, or whatever. But at the same time, if you take time to hone those things, you can really maximize your leadership ability. So I think a lot of people see these things as being sort of interrelated. It's really hard to say one matters more than the other. And I think Akin's story does an even better job than what I've done to really demonstrate that. But I just thought I would offer out a particular tool that people could look at. And there's others. That's not the only one you have to use, but there are other systems and tools out there that you can learn from so that you can figure out what your top strengths are and better build character around those so that you manifest them in a way that is ultimately going to be beneficial to yourself, your community, and the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aurora. Thank you so much, Dr. Akin. Thank you so much for that. So I think we'll come to an end to this conference for the day one. And I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Aurora, Dr. Akin. It's a great privilege, great privilege having people from different sectors and different places to come help young people rewire the mindset about leadership and how they can actually impact the communities and nation at large. So the last question we will put out before we leave today is, I always ask every speaker before they leave. So you've had experiences, Akin has experiences, different sectors, different people would sat down with different leaders. Dr. Aurora, you've also mentored different people, you've sat down with different leaders. What is that one thing you want young people of this generation, not just in Africa or West Africa at large, but this generation, what is that thing you want young leaders should know of our generation?
Akin, you want to go first on this one?
I think you should go first this time, Dr. Aurora.
Yeah. Okay.
Ladies
You
first,
know,
ladies first.
oh,
Who
thank
says,
you, thank you.
who says it's a man's world?
Listen, you've been super generous with me, and I'm super grateful to have been included in this conversation. And so, thank you.
You are so kind with your words. Thank you.
Thanks. I would say, you know, I think back about the things that I was advised when I was a young person that I didn't really take to heart. And I think one of those things was the importance of a network. Because I love change, I've moved industries several times. I've lived in lots of different states. I've lived in 2 different countries. I love change and movement. I love meeting new people. And I never really, like, I'm just not friends with people I went to high school with. I don't really have a lot of friends from college. I've always just sort of like floated around, and that part of that's just who I am and how I'm wired, and it's fine. But part of it, I lament that I did not do a better job earlier in my life and in those earlier careers, really solidifying relationships, not just connections. Like, yeah, I'm connected to people on LinkedIn, but really having relationships. And there's not a whole lot of people from more than maybe like 10 years ago. I mean, there were some, but there's not a whole lot of people from more than 10 years ago in my life that I can, pick up the phone and call them and have, conversations about these things or whatever. So I think that from a professional standpoint, there's something really important and valuable in making relationships, respecting people who are older than you and what they bring to the table. It's easier as a young person to just think that, you don't really have to care about that person. You don't need to connect with your professors or whatever. You do, and you should. And I give that advice all the time, and I'm shocked by how often young people just ignore it, just like, and I think that's something that people need to understand, the value of the network and the connections.
You see what I say? You see what I say, Dr. Aurora? I mean, if I said this before you, you would have said, I said what you wanted to say, exactly my parting words. So I'm wondering, where have you been all my life that I've not met you? So I've met a friend today, and I'm going to keep up with that because I can see some great connectedness there. So what I was going to say before you spoke was, life is a collection of relationships, and relationships would always compensate for the things that you do not have. So for me, it is powerful. Networks and relationships, they're good. Understanding that we are all interconnected, and honestly, everything you would ever need is always in that ecosystem of connection. So if you invest into relationships and networks, you are not going to be barren of anything in life. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Aki. Thanks so much, Dr. Aurora. So today we've come to the end of the day one of the conference, and I want to say a very special thank you to Dr. Aki and Dr. Aurora and Dr. Sylvester, who I'm calling everyone doctor right now. It's actually cool. So Dr. Sylvester as well. So thank you so much for joining, and for everyone who's joined, thank you so much. And I want everyone to know, every young person to know that I'm also a young person as well. But one of the reasons why we had to put this conference is to actually bring together every young person and have people with different mindset and different mindset that are very constructive thoughts that would actually help young people in changing their mindset. So they're not very rigid with their mindsets. And I believe flexible mindset will really help in development. So thank you so much, Dr. Aurora. Thank you so much, Dr. Akin. And we hope that you could join us on the last day, that is tomorrow. So we could also have a general panel section with Dr. Fayemi and Mr. Sylvester. Thank you so much.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for inviting
me. This is
so
great
much.
work, Miracle. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, Miracle. It's important. Education is a big part of it. So good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Dr. Aurora. We'll connect.
Likewise, my new friend.
We'll connect on LinkedIn and we'll talk.
Yes. Excellent.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Bye.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.